The basement door wasn't on the tour. No one mentioned it during Haley Trent's first day at Brookpine's Animal Rescue. Not during the new staff orientation, not in the handbook, not even in the staff group chat where everything from emergency poop scoops to who stole my almond milk was logged. But the dog, that big, aging German shepherd with scars behind his ears and a half-white muzzle, he wouldn't leave it alone. He lay in front of that basement door every single night, stretched out long across the tile, chin on paws, golden eyes fixed on the handle like he expected it to turn, like he needed it to. Haley noticed on her fourth shift. It was nearly closing time, the sun sinking behind the pine trees outside, shadows lengthening in the hall. She was wiping down the kennels when she saw him, silent, still, staring. "Hey there, big guy," she said softly, crouching. "You get lost?" He didn't flinch, didn't growl, didn't move. Just blinked, slow and heavy, like he knew something she didn't. Haley had taken the job out of desperation. She'd returned to her rural hometown of Elk Rock, Oregon after a breakup that felt more like a car crash, both sudden and scarring. Working at an animal shelter wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. You fed the hungry, cleaned up after the forgotten, and sometimes, if you were lucky, sent someone home with a new best friend. But Shadow, as she later learned the German Shepherd was called, wasn't anyone's friend. He didn't play, didn't bark, didn't wag his tail when people passed by. He just waited, always by that basement door. "Why's he down there?" she asked one night as she clocked out. Shadow was already in position. Randy, a part-time volunteer and retired plumber with a voice like crushed gravel, shrugged. "Been that way since he came in. We think he was a stray. Picked up near Highway 20. Never made a sound." "No microchip?" "Nope. Just those eyes creeps me out, honestly." "What's behind that door?" Randy paused. "Old basement. Sealed off years ago after a flood or mold scare. I don't know. Management says leave it alone." "But he won't leave it." "Yup, that dog's got a ghost." On her seventh shift, it rained. Not a drizzle, a full-blown Pacific Northwest downpour that made the roof groan and the windows weep. The power flickered. The backup generator kicked in. The hallway lights turned sickly yellow like something out of a cheap horror film. And that's when it happened. Shadow stood up, not in panic but with purpose, hackles stiff, ears locked forward. Then he growled, low and long and ancient, a sound that didn't belong in a hallway filled with bleach and dog biscuits. "Shadow?" Haley whispered. He barked. Once. Sharp and hard, like a slap. It echoed through the building. And from the basement door, something knocked back. If stories like this make your heart race, and you believe in the quiet heroism of animals, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Heroes for Animals. Discover stories that don't just bark, they change lives. Haley didn't tell anyone about the knock, not at first. She convinced herself it was pipes, or maybe the wind. Old buildings creak, right? But the next morning when she arrived early to restock the feeding shelves, she found Shadow there again. Lying by the door, eyes red-rimmed, chest rising fast. A piece of paper lay crumpled under one paw. She slid it out. It wasn't paper. It was a torn scrap of cardboard. The back of a coloring book page faded but still showing crayon marks. Stick figures. A dog. A small boy with yellow hair. In childish scrawl across the bottom, TJ was here. Haley stood frozen, the world tilting slightly. The drawing wasn't part of any kennel sign. It wasn't recent. The edges were cracked, like it had been folded for years. She flipped it over. Nothing on the back, just dust. She looked at Shadow. Did you bring this?" Shadow thumped his tail once. It was the only time she'd seen him move. That night, Haley couldn't sleep. She lay in her rental apartment above the pharmacy, listening to the rain drum the roof like impatient fingers. TJ was here. She opened her laptop and searched. Local news archive. Elk Rock plus TJ plus missing. It didn't take long. March 2017. Travis Jameson, age 9, reported missing from his backyard on Alder Creek Road. Last seen playing with his German Shepherd. Dog never found. No sign of struggle. Case went cold within 6 weeks. Haley sat back in her chair, heart in her throat. Shadow had been found wandering Highway 20, barely 3 miles from Alder Creek. She clicked the next link. There was a photo of the boy and his dog. The caption read, "Travis and Max." But the dog, It was Shadow. Same scar, same fur, same solemn eyes. Haley closed her laptop and stared into the dark. Shadow hadn't just found the shelter. He came back. To guard something. To wait. To remember what everyone else had forgotten. The next morning, Haley Trent pulled into the Brook Pines parking lot before sunrise, a large coffee in one hand and a fire burning under her skin. Shadow was already there, curled in front of the basement door like a soldier waiting for orders. No leash, no command, just instinct. He lifted his head as she approached and gently touched her knee with his nose. "Good boy," she whispered, crouching beside him. She pulled out the torn drawing, the one with stick figures, a dawn, and the name scrawled in crayon. TJ was here. Shadow sniffed it again, then lowered his head onto the paper like it meant something, like it hurt. Haley reached for the doorknob, still locked. But the lock, it didn't match the others in the building. It was new, shiny, stainless steel, not like the rusted closet handles or chipping paint on the kennel latches. This one had been installed recently, on purpose. Someone was hiding something behind that door. Back in the cluttered break room, Haley dug through a dusty binder marked facility safety and floor plans. It smelled like mildew and paper from the Reagan years. But deep inside, she found it, an old blueprint of the building. There it was, the basement, clearly marked beneath the hallway where Shadow kept watch. The door was labeled Room 7C. Underneath it, a stairwell. 2 rooms, one marked intake storage. The other was just a blank square. She took a photo of the blueprint with her phone. That night, she couldn't sleep, so she started digging deeper. Haley wasn't a detective, but Google made everyone a sleuth. She pulled up every local archive she could find. Travis Jamison, missing child. March 20, age 9. Last seen in his backyard playing with a German Shepherd. Police searched the area, but no body, no dog, no answers. His file had been moved to cold case status within 2 months. Then she found the intake report from Brook Pines. A German Shepherd, male, found near Highway 20. No collar, no name, no microchip. Intake date? 2 days after Travis disappeared. The report was signed Intake Officer Unknown. Her stomach turned. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was the dog. The next morning, Haley approached Mr. Cargill near the back kennels. "Hey, Mr. C, quick question," she began, trying to sound casual. "What's the deal with the basement door?" He didn't look up. "Just old junk. Flooded years ago, no use to us now." "Was it ever used for intake?" "Before my time," he said, but something about his voice faltered. "I found the original floor plan," she pressed. Room 7C was listed. He finally met her gaze, cold, flat. "Drop it." She swallowed. "Right, just curious." He turned his back and walked away. That night, Haley broke the rules. She smuggled Shadow into her car at closing time and drove him home. Technically, she wasn't cleared to foster, but no one was watching. No one seemed to care. At her tiny rental house, he curled up by the front door, guarding it like the shelter's hallway hadn't followed them home. At 2 a.m., Haley woke up from a dreamless sleep to the sound of scratching at the door. Not barking, not whining. Scratching! She found Shadow standing alert, staring at the door like he could hear something on the other side. 2 days later, the shelter lost power during a thunderstorm. The generator sputtered, lights flickered, and the whole building was a mess of flashlights and scrambling volunteers. Haley saw her moment. She grabbed the bolt cutters from the maintenance closet and slipped down the hallway, Shadow trailing behind her like a ghost. The lock on the basement door came off in 2 loud snaps. No one noticed in the chaos. She turned the knob. The door creaked open. A blast of cold, stale air hit her in the face, thick with dust and the faint scent of metal. Shadow stepped through first, his nose twitching. Haley followed. The stairs were steep and narrow. Her flashlight cast long, shaking shadows across cracked concrete. At the bottom was a low-ceilinged room with rusted shelving, piles of broken kennel cages, and one small metal desk flipped on its side. But in the far corner, a cot, folded wool blanket, empty food wrappers, a child-sized hoodie thrown over a plastic chair. Haley's breath caught. "Someone's been living here," she whispered. Shadow padded towards the back wall and began pawing at an overturned crate. Haley helped him push it aside. Behind it was a small red backpack, torn, covered in dust. Inside, a plastic toy dinosaur, a faded baseball cap, and a thin notebook. She opened the cover, written in messy, childish handwriting. TJ's adventure book. She sat down on the floor, heart pounding. The first few pages were innocent. Drawings of a boy and a dog. The shelter's hallway, a stick figure behind bars. Then the tone changed. I'm still here. I think they forgot. He always comes back. I hear his pause. He didn't leave. He never left. Shadow remembers. Haley's hands trembled. She flipped forward. I tried to scream, but no one hears. It's loud sometimes, then quiet. He scratches at the door. One drawing showed a black door, scratch marks across it. Another showed a face. Rough, square, angry. Mr. Cargill. Haley backed away, stomach turning. Shadow sat beside the notebook now, still, watching her. That night, she didn't go home. She drove straight to the Elk Rock Library and scanned every page of the notebook. Then she made a call she hadn't expected. Hey, Eli, it's Haley Trent from high school. Listen, I think I found something related to a missing kid. Travis Jameson. Eli Barnes had become a sheriff's deputy after years in the Marines. He met Haley at the town diner, took the notebook, and flipped through it slowly. Where did you get this? Brook Pines, she whispered. In the basement. He looked up sharply. You went down there? It was locked, Eli. Someone's been down there recently. There's food wrappers, footprints. Eli stared at the pages again, then back at her. This isn't just forgotten paperwork. This is a child who might still be alive. That night, she returned to the basement, this time with a better flashlight and a charged phone. Shadow walked in ahead of her like he'd been leading her there all along. But as they reached the bottom of the steps, she heard it. Footsteps. Fresh. Not her, not Eli. Haley turned off the light and crouched low. The sound stopped. Shadow stood perfectly still, then looked toward the far wall and barked once. Sharp, direct. Behind the cinder blocks, something or someone moved. Haley's breath caught in her chest. She stood frozen in the shelter basement, her flashlight trembling slightly in her grip. Behind her, the silence pressed in, heavy and unnatural. In front of her, a thin wall of cinder blocks, slightly newer than the rest of the basement. Sloppy mortar, poorly patched. Not standard. Not original. Shadow stood beside her, body still embraced, ears forward, tail low. He stared straight at the wall. Then came the knock. One, soft, from the inside. Haley nearly dropped the flashlight. Shadow let out a single sharp bark. Jesus, she whispered, taking a step back. Someone's in there. She fumbled for her phone and dialed Eli Barnes. He met her at the shelter within 30 minutes, still in civilian clothes. No cruiser, no backup. You sure about this? He asked. Haley led him into the dark hallway. Shadow followed without a leash, like he knew exactly where to go. They stepped into the basement. Haley pointed toward the wall. Right there. Eli examined it under his flashlight, knocked 3 times. Silence. Then, one knock back. His jaw tightened. Okay, we're calling this in. Haley nodded. Her heart felt like it was climbing up her throat. Eli, if it's him? We'll handle it right. By nightfall, a full emergency team had assembled. 3 sheriff's deputies, a medic, a firefighter, all working in eerie silence. The media hadn't gotten wind yet. Shadow stayed at Haley's side through it all, calm, focused, like he'd waited 6 years for this moment. The crew chipped at the cinder blocks carefully, not knowing what or who was behind them. The wall was hollow, weak, designed to conceal, not secure. It only took 20 minutes. When the last chunk crumbled, a breath of cold, musty air spilled out. Haley aimed her flashlight into the cavity. There, on a stained mattress, was a boy, curled in on himself, pale, silent. His hair was longer, matted. His body looked fragile, but he was breathing. His eyes squinted against the light. Haley stepped forward, whispering, Travis? The boy blinked, then his eyes fell on Shadow. He sat up slowly, like his bones remembered pain. Shadow? The dog stepped forward, pressed his head into the boy's chest. Travis let out a strangled sob. So did Haley. So did Eli. They carried Travis out wrapped in a space blanket, Shadow walking so close it looked like he was guarding royalty. The paramedics assessed him. Mild dehydration, moderate malnutrition, no visible wounds. But mentally, no one could say yet. Still, he was alive. Haley barely breathed during the ambulance ride. She held his hand all the way to the hospital, even as Shadow sat wedged protectively between the bench and stretcher. They let her stay at the hospital overnight. You're the only one he talks to, the nurse whispered. And it was true. Between long stretches of silence, Travis said only one thing again and again. He didn't leave me. The story exploded. By noon the next day, it was everywhere. Missing boy found alive after 6 years in local animal shelter basement. Hero dog stays with child 6 years, saves him from forgotten prison. Travis Jameson found, Elk Rock shaken by dark discovery. Brook Pines was shut down within 48 hours. Investigators swarmed it. The staff was interviewed, records pulled. Every inch of the basement was excavated. And Mr. Cargill vanished. Gone, no trace. He never even picked up his last paycheck. Haley tried to disappear too, but the media wouldn't allow it. CNN, NBC, local news vans parked outside her apartment, but she gave only one interview. I didn't find him, she said plainly. Shadow did. Travis stayed in a secured children's hospital in Portland for observation. He was 12 now, but he looked 8. He hadn't been to school in 6 years, couldn't remember what streetlights looked like, flinched at the sound of locks. But he remembered Shadow. He never forgot me, he whispered to the social worker. They said he would, but he didn't. Haley visited him every day for a week. Shadow was granted special access as an emotional support animal. Each time they visited, Travis would light up just a little more. One day he asked Haley, did he come back for me? She nodded, every single night. And then the phone call came. Blocked number, male voice, calm, cold. You opened something you shouldn't have. Haley froze in her living room. Shadow stood, ears twitching. Who is this? She asked. You don't know what you're in the middle of. Click. The line went dead. She reported the call to Eli. He had the number traced. Burner phone, dead end. The next day she got another. This time it was a whisper. You think it stops with one boy? Her hands shook. Shadow began sleeping in front of the door again. A week later, on her morning walk with Shadow near the river trail, Haley saw something pinned to a tree near the picnic shelter. An envelope. Her name written on the front in sharp black ink. Inside, a photo. She and Shadow, in the basement doorway, taken from above. On the back, you're being watched. Walk away. She burned the photo in her sink that night. But her resolve only hardened. Haley met with Eli in secret behind City Hall. I want protection, she said. Eli shook his head. You need to let this go. The boy is safe. The story's out. Let the investigators do their job. They're covering for someone. Cargill didn't do this alone. Eli was quiet. Then he looked at her hard. If you go down this road, it won't stop. You know that. Haley looked down at Shadow, who sat calmly by her feet watching the street. I know, she whispered. But neither did he. 2 weeks had passed since Travis Jameson emerged from behind the basement wall of Brook Pines. The headlines had faded. The press had packed up their vans. The shelter was sealed shut with yellow tape and state-issued padlocks. But Haley couldn't rest. Not with that voicemail still echoing in her head. You think it stops with one boy? Shadow stayed close to her since that night. Closer than ever. He barely left her side, his ears constantly twitching at the smallest noises. The creak of a floorboard. The slam of a car door. She hadn't slept through the night in 12 days. And she wasn't going to, not until she knew exactly what had happened underneath that shelter. And why. On a rainy Thursday morning, Haley sat at her kitchen table with a cup of gas station coffee and her laptop open. She still had remote access to the shelter's digital intake system. As a kennel tech, she'd been granted limited admin status. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. She scrolled through archived staff listings, most of the names she recognized. Randy, Ellie, Mr. Cargill. Then, something odd. A listing dated back to 2015 labeled Secondary Intake Coordinator. The name, Dana Ellsworth. But unlike the others, her contact details were blank. No address, no phone, just a line labeled Clearance, PRV LR19. Private clearance? Haley narrowed her eyes. That wasn't standard. Not even close. She plugged the name into Google. Nothing. Then Facebook, LinkedIn, white pages. Still nothing. It was like Dana Ellsworth never existed. She snapped a screenshot and called Eli. Ever heard of anyone named Dana Ellsworth working at Brook Pines? She asked. No, he said. Should I have? She's listed in the system, but she doesn't have any info, no ID, just a private clearance code. There was a pause. Text me the file, he said. Let me dig. Later that night, Eli called her back. His voice was different, quiet, serious. That code, he said, PRV LR19, that's not county. It's not state either. Then what is it? It's federal-level clearance from a defense contractor registry. Haley blinked. Why the hell would someone like that be working at a dog shelter? Eli's voice dropped lower. I don't think that place was ever just a shelter. Haley didn't sleep. She kept replaying Travis's words at the hospital. They wore masks like doctors, but they didn't smell like hospitals. They called me Subject 9. She pulled out her notebook and wrote it again in block letters. Subject 9. If he was 9, how many came before? By morning, Haley was deep into old county records. Permits, grant disbursements, news clippings. She found a press release from 2012. Elk Rock County partners with Laurel Ridge Research Foundation to expand animal rehabilitation and public wellness programs. Laurel Ridge. She searched the name. No website, no social media, but 2 mentions in obscure government budgets under behavioral conditioning trials and stress response adaptation studies. Shadow, curled by her feet, lifted his head. Something happened here, she whispered, and nobody wants to remember it. That weekend, Haley drove 2 hours to Portland to visit Travis. He looked healthier. He'd put on weight. He was speaking more now, even smiling. But some shadows stayed behind his eyes. She sat beside him as Shadow gently placed his head in the boy's lap. After a long silence, she asked, "Do you remember anyone else? Anyone like you?" Travis nodded slowly. "There was a boy named Tyler, but he cried a lot. They said he wasn't strong enough. Then he stopped coming." "What did they call you?" He didn't look at her. Subject 9. Her stomach twisted. "What about the others?" "I don't know their names, only numbers. I think there were 12. He paused. "I heard them say it once, 9's the one who remembers." That night, Haley called Eli again. "We need someone who knows more, who's worked with programs like this." Eli exhaled on the other end. "I might know a guy." His name was Maddox, former federal oversight officer, now freelance investigator. Rumor was he'd uncovered a pharma trial scandal in New Mexico, but dropped out of public life after a whistleblower went missing. They met at a rundown gas station diner off Route 17. Haley brought Shadow, who sat beside her like a living shadow. Maddox was gray-haired, sharp-eyed, and dressed like someone who didn't want to be remembered. "You're the nurse?" he asked. "Yes." "You brought the dog?" He nodded toward Shadow. "He was there, every night." Maddox raised an eyebrow. "Smart one." She handed him a folder. Copies of Travis's statements, digital screenshots, photos of the shelter basement. He read in silence for nearly 15 minutes. The only sound was the crackle of a nearby jukebox playing Patsy Cline. When he finally looked up, he said, "You're not crazy. Tell me something I don't know." Maddox tapped the papers. "This looks like a black site trial under an old program called Project Fawn." "What is that?" "Behavioral reprogramming. Think trauma-induced memory overwrite. They used to test on prisoners, then move to children with unstable family backgrounds. The logic? Less oversight, easier to control." Haley's face went pale. "And they did this in an animal shelter?" Maddox nodded. "Public-facing institutions are the best cover. Churches, youth centers, animal facilities. No one questions the comings and goings." "Why Travis?" He shrugged. "Wrong kid, right profile, mother deceased, living with unstable uncle. No immediate outcry, and a bond with a trained dog. That's gold for testing attachment responses." That night, Haley sat on her porch with a blanket over her knees and Shadow lying at her feet. She looked up at the stars and wondered how many kids like Travis were still out there, waiting behind some locked door for someone, anyone, to remember them. She flipped through her notes. If Travis was Subject 9, where were 1 through 8? And what happened to 10 through 12? She typed Project Fawn into the search bar again. Only one result came up, an archived news clipping from 2011. Local boy found dead outside defunct behavioral research facility in Redding. The facility's name? Laurel Ridge. Haley looked down at Shadow. He was awake, growling. The article wouldn't leave Haley alone. An old newspaper clipping buried deep in an archived blog from 2011. The headline read, "Unidentified boy found dead near abandoned behavioral facility." The photo was grainy, black and white, a single squad car in front of a crumbling brick building, a line of crime scene tape fluttering in the wind, and just barely visible on the side of the wall, spray-painted in red block letters. Fawn 12. 12. Haley stared at it for nearly 10 minutes. They didn't stop. 2 mornings later, Maddox picked her up in his battered Chevy Suburban. Shadow climbed into the back seat like he'd done it his whole life. They drove east, into the backwoods of rural Oregon, where most roads didn't have names and half the mailboxes were broken. Their destination was Laurel Ridge, a long-defunct research foundation once praised for its trauma rehabilitation programs. The reality was far darker. The building was nothing more than a concrete skeleton now. Time had gnawed at its walls. Vines tangled across broken windows. Birds nested in the exposed beams. Still, as they stepped out of the truck, Haley could feel it. That heaviness, like something unfinished, was watching her. Inside, the floors were warped. The air smelled like mildew and metal. Shadow stayed close to her hip, tail stiff, nose high. Haley found an old steel door marked Archive A. Maddox kicked it in. Inside were dozens of rusted cabinets, most empty. But in one drawer, sealed in a moldy manila envelope, was a file stamped Echo 14. The pages were partially redacted, but she recognized what they were. Brain scans, behavioral charts, profiles marked by number, not name. Subject 1, Subject 2, Subject 3, all the way to Subject 13. Subject 9 was Travis. Subject 12, Marcus Holt, the boy from the article. But Subjects 10 and 11, status, relocated. Unknown. Haley's stomach sank. They were still out there. Back home, Haley pulled an all-nighter. Coffee, Google, VPNs, private records, leaked data archives. By sunrise, one name surfaced repeatedly. Riverbend Youth Wellness Center. Privately owned, built in 2017 on county-leased land just outside of Roseburg. No public patient registry. No operating license in the state health department database. No website, but it had a six-figure grant from a contractor tied to Laurel Ridge. She stared at the screen. This was it. This was where they'd moved the project. By 10 a.m., she was on the road. Shadow rode shotgun, eyes focused on the horizon. The drive was long and winding, farther than she liked, past state-maintained roads into rural country. When she finally found the address, she almost missed it. A gravel driveway veered off a county highway lined with tall pine trees. No sign, no name. Just a black iron gate and a guard booth with mirrored windows. Haley parked the car and got out, clipboard in hand. Shadow followed on leash. She approached slowly, trying to look like someone delivering medical supplies. Or maybe a wellness auditor. She hadn't decided yet. Before she could knock, the booth window slid open. A man in scrubs leaned out. "Can I help you?" "I was told you might be hiring," she said, feigning calm. The man stared at her, then at Shadow, then back to her. "We're not open to the public," he said flatly. "I'm a certified trauma nurse," she added, offering a smile. "Worked with adolescents." The man narrowed his eyes. "We're done here," he said. But not before she saw the lanyard around his neck. A black tag, barely visible, stamped in faded red Echo 14. Back in Elk Rock, she met Maddox at the only diner still open after 9 p.m. She showed him the photo she snapped from the booth, zoomed in on the badge, the gates, the camera mounts. "They moved the project here," she said. Maddox stared at the images for a long time, then nodded. Same code, same structure, they kept it going. "Why?" He leaned back, his expression grim. "If you can erase a memory, you can rewrite a life." They were testing emotional suppression, ways to forcibly mute trauma reactions. First, they tried veterans, too unpredictable. Then orphans, wards of the state, then kids like Travis. No oversight? Private contractors, no rules, no audits. Haley clenched her fists. "They're using children." Maddox looked down at Shadow. "Dogs don't lie," he said. "And that one's still pacing at night, isn't he?" That night, Haley didn't sleep. She lay on the couch, Shadow beside her. At 2:13 a.m., she rose and took him where he walked through downtown. Elk Rock was silent. She passed the post office, the bakery, the darkened pharmacy. And then Shadow stopped, stiffened, his ears locked on something across the street. A black SUV, parked, engine idling. No license plate, no visible driver. Haley turned to walk away, but then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. "Stop asking questions." She looked down at Shadow. He growled, low, steady. Not afraid. The next morning, she opened her email and found something unexpected. A scanned copy of a termination file. Subject 10, status, moved. Subject 11, status, terminated, complication. Subject 13, reassigned to facility RYW2. She recognized that code. RYW equals Riverbend Youth Wellness. Facility 2. Travis wasn't the last. She called Eli. "We need a subpoena," she said. Eli was quiet on the line. "I don't know if I can get that." "Then get me someone who can." "I'll try." "No, Eli, you have to." That night, a knock came at her door. She peeked through the curtain. No one. But sitting on her porch was an envelope. Inside, a photo. Her. Shadow. Maddox. Sitting in the diner. On the back, written in red Sharpie, "Walk away or you won't walk again." Haley stared at the message. Shadow stood beside her, fur bristling. She didn't speak, didn't tremble. Instead, she tore the photo in half. and threw it into the fire. Haley didn't scream when she found the photo on her porch. She didn't call Eli, didn't panic. She picked it up by the edge, walked into the living room, and dropped it into the fireplace. The flame curled its corners like a warning. She didn't blink. She just watched it turn to ash. Shadow sat at her feet, ears tilted back slightly, as if he, too, understood. "We're not done," she whispered, and he thumped his tail once. The next morning, Haley met Maddox at a laundromat outside Elk Rock, the kind with broken vending machines and no security cameras. He looked worse than usual, hollowed out, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "They know," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "You got their attention. Now they're covering tracks." She slid her laptop across the table. One PDF was open on the screen, a redacted transport manifest she'd pulled from a leaked inspection report. A single line was left uncensored. Subject 13A. Emergency transfer to RYW2. Clearance Black Echo. Maddox read it twice, then leaned back. Black Echo. That's deep. Deep enough they don't even talk about it anymore. Haley clenched her fists. "We need to go in. Not just talk about it. Get whoever's left." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "We'll need a new plan, and fast." They worked out of Maddox's truck for 3 nights straight. He'd parked it in a campground 2 towns over, off-grid. There were maps taped to the dash, blueprints of the Riverbend facility, rotation schedules he'd bribed a janitor for. Riverbend was bigger than Brook Pines. Fenced in, patrolled at night, high-end surveillance. But it had one vulnerability. The northwest perimeter near the utility maintenance road hadn't been updated since the building's expansion in 2021. The cameras were older, had blind spots. The brush was overgrown. "It's the only place we can breach without triggering alarms," Maddox said. "We bring Shadow," Haley added. "He'll know before we do if someone's coming." Maddox didn't argue. They picked a stormy Tuesday night. Heavy clouds, low wind, no moon. Perfect. Haley wore black jeans, an oversized hoodie, and a gray beanie pulled low. She parked her car 3 miles from the site and hiked the rest on foot. Her boots were soaked by the time she reached the fence line. Maddox arrived in a nondescript truck with tinted windows and a fake animal control decal on the side. Shadow sat in the back, calm as ever, tail wagging softly but steady. They waited until 2:10 a.m. Then they moved. Maddox clipped the chain on the side gate. No sensor, no alarm. They slipped in. Inside, the facility was dead silent. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A soft mechanical hum echoed from vents. The walls were painted pastel blue. Labels read things like Wellness Pod A and Behavioral Adjustment Suite. Shadow stayed close to Haley's side, alert but quiet. Maddox held a flashlight low, scanning each door number. "Basement level," he whispered, "room 212B. They descended the stairwell quickly. No cameras in the lower halls. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The air changed, drier, processed. At the bottom, a hallway with no windows, just numbered doors. 212A, 212B. They stopped. A red stripe crossed the floor in front of it. No label, just a biometric lock. Maddox swiped a cloned ID badge. Denied. Again, denied. Shadow growled. Then, from the other side of the door, a knock. Haley froze. She dropped to her knees, pressed her ear to the door. "Subject 13, she whispered. Silence. Then, yes. The voice was soft, feminine, young. Then the lock clicked. The door opened. The girl standing there looked no older than 15. Shaved head, gray medical scrubs, bare feet. But her eyes, wide, aware, watching. "You came," she whispered, as if she'd known they would. Shadow stepped forward first, nosing her palm. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him without hesitation. "You're real," she said, almost in disbelief. "They said you were a dream." Haley swallowed. "We're here to get you out." The girl stood slowly. "Then we have to hurry. They're not asleep." Haley looked at Maddox. "What?" The girl turned, pointed down the hall. "Subject 10. They moved him back here last week. He helped me. He doesn't belong here either." Maddox muttered, "This wasn't the plan." Haley straightened. "Plans change. Room 215. Another red stripe. Haley knocked softly. "Subject 10? No response. Shadow scratched at the door once. Inside, they found a boy, maybe 17. Tall, thin, expression vacant. Bruises marked both arms. He lay on the floor staring at the ceiling. "Can you hear me?" Haley asked. He blinked, then slowly sat up. "Are you the ones from the stories?" "No," she said gently. "We're real." She held out her hand. He took it. As they stepped back into the hallway, red lights flashed. Sirens blared above them. "Trip delay," Maddox said. "They looped the surveillance, but not forever. Go." They ran. Shadow took the lead. Footsteps echoed behind them. Security guards fast. They reached the exit stairwell, but two men blocked the door. "Don't move!" Tasers raised, but Shadow lunged. One guard stumbled. Maddox tackled the other. Haley grabbed the kids and bolted. Outside, rain fell in sheets. The truck was waiting. Maddox leapt in the driver's seat, soaking wet, adrenaline pumping. Haley threw the door open, pulled the kids in, slammed it shut. Shadow jumped in last, fur dripping. Maddox floored it. They didn't look back. They drove until the sun came up. Past rivers, farms, ghost towns. Haley sat in the back seat with the girl's head on her shoulder. The boy stared out the window, unmoving but breathing. Shadow slept between them, warm and silent. No one spoke, not for a long time. Eventually, Maddox pulled into a safe house he'd used before, an old cabin outside Eugene. No Wi-Fi, no electricity, just quiet. They got the kids warm, fed, safe. Haley sat on the porch with Shadow beside her, listening to the wind in the trees. "You did good, boy," she whispered. He didn't move, but she felt it. That same calm, steady heartbeat. That same loyalty. The kind that waits outside locked doors, no matter how long it takes. It took weeks before the dust settled. Maddox stayed off the grid, sleeping in his truck and using a burner phone for brief updates. Haley remained in Elk Rock, keeping close to the children, Riley and Luke, as they slowly adjusted to the strange freedom of ordinary life. The safe house, once cold and bare, began to feel like something more. Not quite a home, not yet, but it had warmth, scented with baking bread and the soft thud of Shadow's tail on the kitchen floor. There was still fear, still long silences and sudden flinches at loud noises. But there were also moments of laughter. Riley curled on the porch steps with a worn paperback novel. Luke learning how to ride a bike on the dirt road out front, and Shadow always nearby, watching, guarding, waiting. Then one morning Eli called. "I got a judge, quiet, military background. He'll hear it off the record first, but it's something." Haley looked out the window where Riley was feeding Shadow bits of toast. "We're ready," she said. Testifying wasn't easy. The system wasn't built for stories like theirs. Trauma subject, they called Riley. State-dependent behavior anomaly, they labeled Luke. Haley read every word of every page, then tore most of them apart on the stand. She told the truth, not just about Riverbend or Echo 14 or the basement, but about the boy found in Brook Pines, about a shelter dog who wouldn't budge from a locked door, about how that dog, against all odds, had known something no one else had bothered to notice. Shadow sat beside her in court. The bailiff tried to object. The judge let him stay. The jury wasn't supposed to cry, but some did. One woman clutched her locket the whole time. Another man wiped his glasses over and over, even though they weren't fogged. They listened, not to statistics, not to policies, to the story, and to the dog who refused to forget. The result wasn't everything they'd hoped for. Riverbend was shut down, officially for licensing violations. 2 administrators were placed under federal investigation. 1 disappeared. But there were no handcuffs, no headlines, just silence. Still, Haley counted it as a win, because Riley and Luke were no longer numbers on a spreadsheet. They were hers now, legally, permanently. The weeks that followed were strange. Maddox left a voicemail and then vanished again. Something about heading to Arizona, chasing trout, and staying away from computers. Haley didn't ask for more. She turned the safe house into a true home, painted the walls, repaired the back porch. She enrolled the kids in a small homeschool collective nearby, taught them how to make chili from scratch, how to recognize mountain birds, how to plant potatoes. And Shadow? He learned to sleep with both eyes closed again. Until one night, Haley woke to a soft whine. Shadow was at the front door, standing still, ears perked, tail rigid. She rubbed her eyes and walked over. He didn't look at her, just the door. She opened it. There was nothing there, only fog, a slight chill in the air, the whisper of pine trees. And yet he didn't move. "Come on, boy," she said softly. But Shadow lay down, right there, right where he used to lie in front of that basement door. She stood beside him for a long while, then sat down too. "I think about them sometimes," she whispered. "The ones we didn't find." Shadow exhaled, a long, warm breath against her leg. "I know we can't save everyone," she added, "but it doesn't feel right to stop." Weeks later, a package arrived, no return address. Inside, a photograph, grainy, taken at night, a concrete wall, tagged in red, Echo 15, and beneath it, a note written in all caps. "You open one door, now open the next." She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She simply walked outside and found Shadow lying in his usual spot. "Looks like we're not done," she said. He stood, tail wagging once, And so the story didn't end in a courtroom. It didn't end with applause or medals or headlines. It ended the way all real stories do, with a choice to stop or to keep going. Thank you so much for following the story of the shelter dog who refused to leave the basement door. We hope it moved you. What would you have done if Shadow had appeared in your town, refusing to leave that door? Would you have trusted him? Would you have opened it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Heroes for Animals, for more powerful, true-to-life stories where animals change lives and sometimes save them. Until next time, stay kind, stay alert, and don't ignore the dog who won't walk away.